Black Lives Matter. The best way to judge a social or political movement is by the behavior and actions of its representatives. For example, do they engage in reasonable, respectful discourse?
Lives matter! Do you think Black Lives Matter?
We are trying. We're gonna let you on the mic. We are gonna give you the mic.
Do they possess the emotional maturity of rational thinking adults?
Your kids are going to hate you on the back of racism! Yes! Yes! Yes, here, everywhere! Violence! People want... Come here, Drea! Come here, Drea! Come here, baby! Come here, swear to God! It is our duty to win! We must love and support each other! We must love and support each other! We have nothing to lose but our chains! We have nothing to lose but our chains!
We have nothing to lose but our chains. How does the absurdity of this statement escape these deluded fools? What chains do these privileged college kids have to lose exactly? Especially Jonathan Butler, son of a multimillionaire and leader of this particular cadre of intellectual infants. And what kind of progressive principles does Black Lives Matter stand for? Segregation. Now I thought that was the opposite of what this woman stood for, or rather sat for, back in 1955. You see, instead of wanting to be judged for the content of their character, these narcissistic bedwetters want special privileges based purely on the colour of their skin. And that, of course, is what you call racism. But who am I to judge Black Lives Matter and their lived experience of having to endure the legacy of slavery and all that? Because, let's face it, after all,
You're fucking a white male! So? You're a white man!
Yeah. So let me offer up someone who's infinitely more wise and knowledgeable than me about these things, and someone I have no hesitation in saying is probably one of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century. Oh, and yeah, he's black.
Explain that.
Well, in 1960, which would be almost 100 years after the end of slavery, 22% of black kids grew up in homes with only one parent.
Just 22%?
Yes.
4 out of 5 were in homes with both parents?
Yes. 30 years later, after the liberal welfare state, that number had more than tripled. And so I said, well, let us compare, if we can speculate on how much that 22% was due to the legacy of slavery. But we know that tripling was not due to the legacy of slavery. It was due to the legacy of a whole different set of policies. And you can look at it so many other ways. Education. Stuyvesant High School in New York, as you know, you get into only by passing a very tough exam. In 2012, the percentage of black students who had gotten into Stuyvesant High School was less than 1/10 of the percentage of black students who had gotten into Stuyvesant High School 33 years earlier.
I didn't know that.
There's Dunbar High School in Washington, which was an elite black high school for a very long time. In 1993, the number of kids out of Dunbar High School who went on to college was less than it was 60 years earlier, which would have been in the depth of the Great Depression. And so you can run through a whole bunch of other things like that. Look at the housing projects. The housing projects in the first half of the 20th century, during that first 100 years after slavery, did not have the high crime rates, the murder rates, the graffiti, all the rest of it that we associate. None of that was there. People, like the New York Times, Christoph should read his own old papers, pointed out that on Saturday mornings it was common in the housing project of this earlier era for parents to leave their doors unlocked because some of the parents could afford television, some couldn't. So the ones who had television would leave their doors unlocked, and the kids from the other families could come down there and watch television with them. Well, now the latest figures show that most people below the poverty line have 2 television sets and cable, but they wouldn't dare leave their doors unlocked in a public housing project.
I'm quoting that column again. Liberals have wreaked more havoc on blacks than the supposed legacy of slavery they talk about.
Yes.
You don't mean that hyperbolically.
No, I do not. But if you look at something else, if you look at those blacks, look at black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? One, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
Eliminate it.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Colorblind
Yeah.
policy completely. All right. What prospect for that do you see?
None.
In Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The black kids and the white kids, the same. Quoting Intellectuals and Race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no black subculture, close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this
No. The expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had.
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book on which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both. But in terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society. And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group.
What advice would you give a young Thomas Sowell? How do you make something of yourself as an African American in America today?
The way anybody else would. You equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for.